In this video, Angie will be completing the IADL of meal preparation as she sits down to butter bread. This is an important occupation unique to her as she likes to eat a quick meal before she starts her day each morning. Angie completes bilateral movements on the right and left side as the right hand holds the knife and the left hand stabilizes the plate. Let's take a look at each of the 5 phases for this activity. The first phase is the stance phase. Angie is comfortably sitting with her feet planted on the ground and arms at her side. She is in a balanced position as she prepares to initiate the task. This is a relatively static phase. Next is the preparatory phase, or also known as the wind-up phase. As Angie reaches for the knife, her muscles are prepared to generate enough force and momentum to complete this movement at all joints involved. The movement phase is the action part of the task. With a knife grasped in her right hand, Angie scoops out butter and spreads it on the bread. With her left hand, Angie stabilizes the plate. This is the acceleration and motion phase. The fourth phase is the follow-through phase, or deceleration phase. Angie places the knife back on the table in its original position. The velocity of the movements decreases as the body segments prepare to stop motion. Finally, the last phase is known as recovery. Angie brings her hand back to her side and once again resumes the same position at the start of this activity. The body is preparing to regain balance and completely stop motion. At the stance phase, Angie's left and right extremities are completing the same motions. Her neck is slightly flexed at 15 degrees as she looks at the bread and butter on the table in front of her. Cervical flexion remains at the same range of motion throughout. Angie's shoulders are both abducted and flexed at the glenohumeral joint. Her elbows are not quite fully extended to -5 degrees at the humeral-ulnar joint. Her forearms are pronated at the proximal and distal radio-ulnar joints, and her wrist is extended at the radiocarpal joint. For thumb movements, she has slight palmar abduction as well as MP and IP extension. Digits 2 through 5 are flexed at the MP, PIP, and DIP joints in the stance phase, as well as slightly abducted. For the preparatory phase, all movements on the left are the same as in the stance phase, so we will only look at Angie's right extremities. Her neck is still flexed at 15 degrees, and now she has slight cervical rotation to the right as she reaches for the knife on the table. Her shoulder extends to 20 degrees, then flexes to 30 degrees in this phase. Her shoulder also abducts and internally rotates to a greater range of motion compared to the stance phase. Angie's elbow flexes to 90 degrees on the table, and her forearm pronates completely to 80 degrees. Her wrist is extended as well. Her thumb slightly radially abducts at the CMC joint and is extended completely at 0 degrees at the MP and IP joints. As she is about to pick up the knife, her digits are completing different movements at each joint. At digit 2, the MP and PIP are extended to 0 degrees, while the DIP is hyperextended at plus 20 degrees. Digit 3 and 4 flex at the MP, PIP, and DIP. Digit 5 is not visible in this clip. Digits 2 through 4 are slightly abducted as well. Go ahead. The movement phase portrays Angie bringing the knife to the butter, scooping some out, then buttering the bread. Her neck is still flexed and slightly rotated, and her trunk rotates slightly as well at the upper thoracic joint. Angie's right and left extremity movements are now different as her right hand holds the knife and butters the bread, and her left hand stabilizes the plate. Also, the left extremities move from the stance phase to the movement phase. Starting with the right extremities, the shoulder moves from horizontal abduction and shoulder abduction while scooping out butter to horizontal adduction and shoulder adduction when buttering the bread. The shoulder is also internally rotated. The elbow flexes from 90 degrees to 100 degrees when lifting the knife with butter, then back to 90 degrees as Angie butters the bread. Her forearm is slightly supinated when bringing the knife to the bread and completely pronated at 80 degrees as she butters it. Her wrist is flexed and ulnarly deviated. The MP and IP joints of the thumb are flexed, and there is palmar abduction as well. As she holds the knife, digit 2, MP, PIP, and DIP joints are extended, and digits 3 through 5 are flexed at these joints. There is also slight MP abduction. For the left side movements in this phase, there is shoulder flexion, abduction, and internal rotation at the glenohumeral joint. The elbow is flexed at 90 degrees and the forearm is completely pronated to 80 degrees. Angie's wrist is slightly extended and ulnarly deviated. Radial abduction is at the normal range of motion of 45 degrees, and there is extension at the MP and IP joints of the thumb. The digits are all abducted at the MP joint. Digits 2, 4, and 5 are extending at the MP, PIP, and DIP joints. Digit 3 displays extension at the MP and DIP, but flexion at the PIP. In the follow-through phase, Angie's neck is flexed and she rotates her trunk to return the knife back to its position on the table. The right and left extremities are doing different movements again in this phase. On the right, Angie's shoulder is adducted, externally rotated, and horizontally abducted. The elbow is moving into extension and the forearm moves from slight supination to complete pronation. Her wrist is radially deviated as well as extended. There is 0 degrees of extension at the MP and IP joints of the thumb, and it is also radially abducted at the CMC joint. Digit 2 is extended at the MP, PIP, and DIP joints as her index finger is on top of the knife to hold it in place. Digits 3 and 4 are flexed at the MP, PIP, and DIP joints, and digit 5 is not visible, but her joints would be flexed as well. There is slight digit abduction at the MPs for digits 2 through 5. Angie's left extremities do not move in this phase, and they stay positioned the same way as in the movement phase. For the recovery phase, Angie's extremities are now both completing the same movements once again, but the right side moves from the follow-through to recovery phase, and the left side moves from the movement to recovery phase. There is still slight cervical flexion in this phase. There is right and left shoulder adduction and slight internal rotation. Her elbows are extending, forearms are pronating, and wrists are extending as she lowers her arms back to her side. At the thumb, Angie has slight palmar abduction and MP and IP extension. Right and left digits 2 through 5 are flexed at the MP, PIP, and DIP joints, and there is slight abduction at the MP joints.